Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everybody, this is lesson 3. We'll be looking at another context for the study of the English Romantics, empire. The English Romantics were writing at the time that the British government, the East India Company and the army was acquiring large swaths of territory across the world, specifically in the East Asia. What role did empire, fledgling but nevertheless a proto-empire, have to do with the English Romantics? One argument you need to understand and assimilate when looking at Wordsworth, Coleridge and their generation is that these distant parts of the world, the peripheries of the world, were coming closer home because material and information was being brought into the English countryside, English stores and the English home. So you would have China as in pottery, you would have tobacco which dates back to Edmund Spencer's time, all sorts of products were coming in. Tea comes in, and Samuel Pepys has recorded in his diary about the arrival of tea from China in India and India into England. Indian travelers, Indian seamen, sailors were also arriving in England. So the empire and the peripheries were actually coming home as well. This also generated an interest in their cultural and racial other. The Turkish, Chinese and Indians were the subject of several pieces of literary works during this time. Take a look at, as a kind of epigraph to the lesson, Byron's description of Hassan in the Giaour. His creed, this is a description of Hassan, his creed which said that woman is but dust, a soulless toy for tyrant's lust. What is Byron doing? Byron is stereotyping the vulnerable non-European woman held prisoner by the tyrannical Turkish monarch. Elsewhere, such a vulnerable racial, gendered other is the subject of Wordsworth's The Complaint of a Forsaken Indian Woman. Up on your screens as part of the slide is an extract from this particular poem. Alas, ye might have dragged me on another day. A single one. Too soon I yielded to despair. Why did ye listen to my prayer? When ye were gone, my limb was stronger. And oh, how grievously I rue that afterward a little longer, my friends, I did not follow you. And then the forsaken Indian woman. By Indian, he's referring to a Native American. Please understand that. It's not East Indian as in the subcontinent. My child they gave thee to another, a woman who was not thy mother. When from my arms my babe they took, on me how strangely did he look. Through his whole body something ran, a most strange working did I see, as if he strove to be a man. And then he stretched his arm, how wild, oh mercy, like a helpless child. And then it concludes, young as I am, my course is run. I shall not see another sun. I cannot lift my limb to know if they have any life or no. My poor forsaken child, if I for once could have thee close to me, with happy heart I then would die, and my last thought would happy be. But thou, dear babe, art far away, nor shall I see another day. What's Wordsworth doing here? Wordsworth focuses on the vulnerable Native American woman, abandoned to die while her tribe marches onward. It's about a Native American tribe that moves from one place to the other, and this woman who's ailing is abandoned to die, but her child is taken away because they think the child has a better chance of survival, so the tribe takes the child and goes onward. The poem documents the woman's grief at being parted from her son. Her food is gone, and she recognizes signs of her own death, as she says she cannot lift her limbs to know if they have any life. The poem ends with her wishing she could see her son once more before she dies. Think of the number of instances where other cultures, races and geographies figure in the lyrical ballads. I have a short inventory. The Spanish discovery and penetration of the Americas in the foster mother's tale. Depictions of British colonial wars and the consequences in the female vagrant and the mad mother. Or the exoticism of what we have just looked at, the complaint of a forsaken Indian woman. Then there is of course the famous Coleridge, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, with its depictions of the South Pole and the tropical latitudes. Think of the Malay dream sequence in Thomas de Quincey's The Confessions of an English Opium Eater. Think of Byron's Turkish Tales, Thomas William Beckford's Vathek, and Charlotte Dacre's Zofloya. Arabian characters, Moors, the distant East, all figure in this. The romantic interest in the exotic, as numerous critics such as Sarah Suleri, Sari McDissey, Nigel Leeskin, Tim Fulford and others have shown, came from an encounter with a cultural other in the colonies. Clearly, the British romantic writers were equally obsessed and concerned with the distant others. English identity in the Romantic period was built along with a growing empire. And I would urge you, as you can see from the slide up there, to take a look at the britishempire.co.uk's map room, which shows you map of the world during this period. Accompanying is a YouTube video link as well for you to take a look at. Why this insistence on looking at the empire in our lesson? The point I'm making is, contrary to established ideas and traditional readings where the English romantics were only concerned with their countryside, their local cultures, they were as interested in their racial and cultural others, their distant others. The Romantic period must therefore be contextually located within major moments in Britain's imperial history. The country had just lost its then principal colony, let's not forget America, 1776 to 1783. And consequently, it had set its sights on Asia, mainly India, Australia, the Caribbean, and South Africa. By 1820, in the middle of the Romantic period, 200 million people, over a quarter of the world's population, would be under British domination. And if you think that's an insignificant number, think again. 200 million people across the globe were under British rule. Surely, British identity was not built entirely by the Romantics on local cultures alone. It also drew upon this particular context. England, as I've already mentioned, became an exporter and importer of raw materials, sugar, tobacco, tea, silk, muslin, etc. It therefore needed both source materials and markets. The period saw the expansion of an already extensive slave trading system. For Britain, this dates back to the 16th century, as we know, from Africa to the Americas and then to the Caribbean. There was a national debate over slavery, with the abolition of British involvement in the slave trade coming in 1807 and the ending of slavery in the British colonies in 1834. Convicts were being transported to Australia, and more of Africa began to be explored and discovered. Britain acquired the Cape Colony from the Dutch in 1815. England's Indian Empire began to be settled from the 1760s. The East India Company changed its status from just being a trader to being a ruler through a series of course, political strategies, including war and alliances. By 1793, just before the start of the official English Romantic period, the lyrical ballads appearing in 1798. Now, by 1793, India alone was making a direct contribution of £500,000 directly annually to the English treasury. Think about this. By 1793, India alone was generating £500,000 income for England's economy. It's a huge amount of money by any stretch of imagination. The English Parliament therefore realized that India was a necessity for whatever British identity was likely to be. Up there on your screen is a map of British Empire 1815, just a few years into the 19th century. This comes from the BBC's History British Empire website, and please take a look at the territories marked. The ones in blue are the territories claimed by Britain but not yet settled. British territory before 1793 and British territory being temporarily occupied by Britain. So do you think this progress of empire was smooth? No. The acquisition of empire is a messy job. The East India Company experienced serious mismanagement, including corruption and infighting. Its debt was very high, and the English Parliament and social commentators often called for an investigation into the company's operations. In the 1780s, for instance, the trial of Warren Hastings began in about 1788, followed by the appointment and disputed recall of Governor General Arthur Wellesley, eroded the company's reputation. What this means is the periodical press very often began to make nasty observations about the East India Company and the company men. They called them decadent and they called them corrupt. Even as a measure of pride remained, they said this is perhaps not the way to do it. There was something else. The deaths and sufferings of the English soldiers, particularly in wars with Tipu Sultan through the 1790s, appeared in the newspapers on a regular basis. The London Times, which was launched in 1785, caused several commentators to say that perhaps this acquisition of empire is not such a wise idea. So many of our young people are dying there. Coleridge's brother died at the siege of Seringapatam, incidentally. So the company's huge standing army was trying to acquire territory, but many people were also dying. So many families had their young men go out to India but never returned. Sari Magdisi has proposed that poets like Shelley and Byron use the Orient in different ways so as to invent an idea of Europe itself. Suffering is one component of this, the Englishmen who go out there and suffer. Others have noted the intersection of aesthetic theories and political thought in people like Edmund Burke. Even supposedly individualist texts such as the Prelude, critics like Mary Jacobus have argued, mark a historical repression of the British slave trade. For those of you who are interested, look up Romanticism, Race and Imperial Culture. So then, just have a quick recap what we have been looking at so far. What you need to understand is the English Romantic authors were not only looking at the English countryside. 2, they were also looking elsewhere. Under point 2, how they were looking elsewhere is crucial because things were coming in, money, 500,000 pounds as I mentioned to you, entering the English system. Their people were going out. There were stories of English suffering entering the English public and social discourse. It meant that many young men were going out and dying. It meant the loss of wage, income in the form of the deaths of these young people. Injury-ridden young men came back to England. And if you think carefully about it, the ancient mariner is one such person. The ancient mariner goes out there somewhere to the peripheries of the known world, but he returns a rather damaged sailor. And English literature of the 1798 to 1830 period is full of returning Englishmen. These returning Englishmen are not all right. They are not all there. They have been damaged, they have been injured. For those of you who remember William Blake's famous poem, London, there's a soldier in the poem who is now cursing the palace. Why? The soldier is perhaps one who went out there and fought on behalf of the East India Company and his country and has come back to a situation where he no longer has a job but is also injured and unable to work. What we are looking at therefore is the context of imperial conquest, the exploration of different cultures and how they impinged upon the English Romantics. People like Sarah Suleri in the Rhetoric of English India have argued that even theories of the sublime, which was supposedly based on English and European landscape descriptions and pictorial traditions, draw upon a rhetoric influenced deeply by the exposure to other cultures. Clearly then, the search for the iteration of imperial conquests brought England and its people, including its authors, into close encounters and exchanges with their racial and cultural others. Much of English Romantic poetry, therefore, must be seen as an instantiation of a transnational connection. Thank you.